All right, everybody, welcome back to the Something About Soccer podcast, episode 5, where we will be covering weeks 4 and 5 in the MLS, as well as a myriad of other topics. I am joined today by BizarraBrigade
What's going on, everybody?
and Pixelatedsuits.
Hello.
And I am Dill 40K. These are all of our Twitch football manager names. You can call us Pix, Dill, Biz, whatever you want to call it. But we're going to get straight into it today, and I'm going to ask you guys first. Do you want to start with the good, or do you want to start with the bad? Pix, I'm going to let you choose.
I think we just have to, face the bad.
All right. So the bad this week, I'm sure most of you, if you do follow the MLS, you probably follow the U.S. men's national team as well. A disappointing 1-0 loss against Panama in the semifinals of the CONCACAF Nations League. They're currently playing Canada right now in the third place game, which is 1-1 at halftime as of our recording. But a very, very disappointing, just no fire from the U.S. men's national team. Panama get one shot on target in the dying breaths of extra time or added time. And we get sent packing, and Panama is headed to a final against Mexico. So, Pix, how are you feeling after that? I know out of all of us, you're the one who supports the U.S. men's national team the least. You're a Colombian fan. But what did you, as an outside, perspective, think about that game?
Yeah, I think that there was a lot coming into it. Honestly, I've always kind of had a soft spot for Panama because Panama and Colombia have so much in common. But even despite that, I think that what Christensen has done with Panama has been really impressive over the past 5 years. But I think one of the biggest things isn't so much Panama's performance, because I think Panama, the U.S. were able to keep them down and not have them create too much. But I think the focus and the microscope has to be more so on the United States' performance and also their inaction.
Yeah.
Because a lot of Pochettino's comments in the beginning was, we need to destroy Panama. And then even after the fact, he was even saying that they need to, kind of question about who deserves to wear the U.S. Stars and stripes. And I think that that's a big question, because there were so many players that within the first 45, there wasn't that drive to win. I think that, when you have a game like this, especially when you're already qualified for the World Cup, you have to get an early goal just to make sure that you guys can play with your freedom. And then you guys can do, wacky shit, score crazy team goals, go on solo runs once you have that one goal confidence. Because I think Panama are a side that should be respected, but once you have that one goal cushion, then you could play a little bit more creatively. You can play with the style that you want to go with into the group stages of the World Cup, where you're going to have a little bit more inferior oppositions with the amount of people that are getting into the World Cup. You can play with a different style. You can adapt a little bit to Pochettino's style, as opposed to playing practically to get that to get the goal. Once you get that goal, that's why you should be winning, and that's why you should be firing on all cylinders.
I will say this, though. The U.S. comes into this camp without their two leading strikers, Fuller and Balogun, who, with injuries, is out, but also was not in the greatest of club form, and Ricardo Pepe, who was in great form before getting injured over in the Eredivisie. So that was a question mark going into the camp. Where are we going to get those goals from? And obviously from that game, they weren't coming from anywhere in that semifinal game. But Biz, I know you have some thoughts about Panama being our bogeyman. They've always given us a hard matchup. We know what Panama is going to do. They're going to pack it in, just basically play super defensive football, try to hit us on a counter on a couple chances, and it's exactly what they did. So they played their game plan out perfectly. Biz, what else do you think about it?
Yeah, I think the other thing too. I won't spend so much time trying to analyze tactically what makes them the bogey team or anything like that. But I think it does kind of illustrate and speak to, I think, maybe the underlying problem right now with the U.S. men's national team. And I think what Panama exemplifies, at their core of their national team, is, I think, a work rate and a want. And I think that's something that we've really, in a couple of our previous discussions, both on the watch party and other stuff, we've mentioned that it just seemed like Panama wanted it more. Sure. And I think that's something now that kind of ties into, my overall thoughts for the game. It's, we have a situation now where we have what is perceived, I think, on a worldview, that Mauricio Pochettino is a manager that was brought in to get results, and that's based on his track record and pedigree from all of the different jobs that he's had and occupied in his tenure, over his whole footballing career. And I think there's a pedigree that goes hand in hand with that, with some of the things that he's achieved in the various roles that he's been in. And I think, translating that to what this role is, I don't know, what necessarily the the expectations were for fans, but I think a lot of it was expecting it to just like kind of change like that. And I do think that, you know, with any manager that comes into the team, that instilling culture and rooting out some of those problems is a really big part of it. And I think that's the scariest portion of this whole U.S. men's national team. I guess like the environment right now is the fact that we have a lot of work to do in a really segmented amount of time. That's why I think the whole Berhalter decision, hiring him back on post World Cup originally, was so chastised at the time, because I think a lot of people said like, well, okay, then this really needs to be the decision going forward. Then
for the World Cup.
You need to live and die with that, because you're going to waste a couple windows. We don't have a qualifying segment like we have in previous World Cups because we're hosting along with Canada and Mexico. So you're in the competition. But now, with having said that, you're not going to necessarily be able to maybe be under the gun of some of those various qualification moments that, you know, maybe put some of those players under a microscope and have them perform in like really high pressure, higher leverage situations. And there's all of these different things that can be magnified from this performance that I think shine a light on the fact that the U.S. men's national team right now has like a player desire problem. It's like a player want this problem. And I think that's the biggest thing that I took away from this camp altogether with this Nations League. They're playing Canada right now as we speak, and they're tied at half, but it's such a underlying issue that's, I think, kind of permeated through the team. I mean, it goes all the way back to, the last World Cup with the Gio Reyna nonsense that took place, and how that was handled.
I'll ask you here just quickly, how do we fix that? Is it inserting new blood? Is it patience with this team to instill a new culture with Pochettino? It's hard because we don't have as many competitive matches because we're not qualifying for the World Cup. We're kind of coming at it from a very different perspective where it does feel like there's not much pressure. Maybe the team that he has put together right now doesn't feel as if these tournaments are as important as he wants them to feel they are. What do you think is the road to fixing this sort of problem, Biz?
Well, I think you're seeing it kind of exemplified in the team that he selected with January camp, and really, some of his quotes that we've seen is the fact that he's being honest with a lot of the MLS players and, players that might not have had a chance. It's an open competition. You have to want to be here. And I think that's something that, obviously, with what I've just highlighted, is the fact that there are clearly players that are maybe at a certain level of play in their own European leagues that they're playing in, that when they come into the international duty, there is a clear and obvious indicator that whether it's they don't want to be there, whether it's they don't take it as seriously as, and they're kind of just going through the motions. That's not going to fly anymore under Poch. And you're seeing it with maybe some of the striker decisions that some players were brought in over others. Some of like the Patrick Ajiman. You're
Brian
having
White.
Diego Luna in, Brian White. Yes, thank you, my pride and joy. But those. Having those players and knowing that carrot's kind of dangled for some of the MLS players, that you're going to have players that are willing to, fight for those 50-50 balls, maybe a little bit more than some of the European players. And that needs to be apparent throughout the whole team. You need to have the Tyler Adams, the Weston McKennies, the Christian Pulisic, like all the players that should be the leaders in that locker room. That needs to be kind of weighing on the back of their mind, knowing that I am not guaranteed a position here just because of my stature in the game. And I think that right there, because this team has been touted as a golden generation. These players, this pool of players has been touted as a golden generation pretty much since, they started putting on the U.S. men's national team shirts. We have not seen results that have emphasized that that's the case. If anything, they've been about as disappointing for that label as you could possibly be, in my opinion. They haven't won anything. They haven't done anything that has been that has been worthy of having that label, and it hasn't resulted in it being a linear progression into achieving these great heights. So we're running out of time here. This was a huge moment to try to get some really important minutes and have a high leverage spot, and you just wasted it already. So there's not too many more opportunities for the U.S. to be able to hit the ground running with some of these moments. And I think Poch knows that. And I think that's why the leash is going to be really short on some of these players that aren't, not sprinting for those 50-50 balls, and players that are just kind of that are going through the motions. You got to cut some of those players out and bring in new players that are going to, work hard, even if it's not the best roster on paper. It's just kind of where we're at right now. You got to make sure that it's a team that wants to play together and win more than anything.
No, I totally agree. We will see moving forward. Obviously, by the time we finish this podcast, and we'll probably mention it by the end, whether US was able to beat Canada for that third place win and get revenge over Jesse Marsh led Canada, who we lost to the last time we played. But I'm gonna lighten the mood a little bit. We got rid of the bad news. Let's talk about some good news. And obviously, good news is maybe it's a pretty broad statement in terms of what this is for the game, but depending on our opinions, who knows? Promotion and relegation coming to the United States in the form of the USL, the second division of U.S. soccer. They call it the second division, but it's now going to be a division that exists alongside MLS as opposed to being the league under it. So basically, United States Soccer League owners voted this week to introduce promotion relegation by 2028 as they prepare to launch a new top-tier soccer league. So we all have some USL teams that we follow loosely. I'm an Orange County guy in Southern California. Pix, do you really have one that you follow? Not like you.
Yeah, so in the USL2, Morrisley, it's probably the local, but
Okay.
with this coming, new promotion relegation, they're actually thinking about making a team in Patterson,
Oh, cool.
which is a city that I think in New Jersey, northern New Jersey, kind of deserves to have that. Sort of, we were talking about how Austin, has kind of gotten around that. I think Patterson could really use that, and I'd love to get out there. I've been
Yeah,
to a couple of games there. I saw the Clemens women's team there. I met Carlos Valderrama there, an MLS MVP,
that's awesome.
an all-timer. But yeah, so I think the stadium's really nice, and I think that a good soccer team would be really nice. The thing about promotion relegation and just the USL in sort of the New York area specifically is that it's so hard to maintain. We've had a couple teams come and go, Queensboro, Brookhaven, all these different teams. It's just so hard to finance a team in the city and find a place to have a permanent home, or even finding leases for those soccer pitches where you can have that space just reserved for you. So it's always been really tough. So I think it's really a good idea to have it in Patterson and have it somewhere. I mean, especially because it's closer to me, and just having it's kind of rare to have teams that actually identify with Jersey. So I'm really excited for promotion relegation to have that team, but also just the prospect of promotion relegation overall. And I think the FM saves that are going to come from that are going to be really, really fun. And I think it's going to get some, people abroad to actually, take a look at the USL over the MLS, because I think the MLS kind of complicates things a lot of the times.
Yeah, and I also think fans within here too will be a little interested to see a different type of system existing in the United States sports landscape, as opposed to MLS just being the U.S. version of soccer. So they're saying it's going to be three levels: USL Championship down to USL League One. So basically, USL Championship, League One, and then League Two. Biz, two-pronged question: do you have a USL team that you support or follow in any way? And do you think logistically, I know they voted to make this happen, and they have some rules for what teams could qualify, what they need from stadiums, what cities the teams can be located in. But do you still think this is logistically viable in terms of being able to happen in the United States? That doesn't change the challenges that they're going to face just because they voted it in.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think, honestly, the biggest portion of this with where we're going with this argument. And so to answer your first question, I just started with, I think, getting into the football manager space a little bit more. I feel like I needed to practice what I preach. So I started to loosely follow some of the USL2 happenings. So behind me, you can actually see, probably not on the actual camera that we have right here, but I got a little sticker of Minneapolis City right behind me.
Okay.
So that's our USL2 side that's local here. But I think we have 4 different USL2 teams in Minnesota right now. We have one up in Duluth that just played an Open Cup over the weekend. You have Rochester, and then there's one down in the Stillwater, which is a suburb, kind of right on the Wisconsin border, that has I think it's called St. Croix. St. Croix Kickers is the other team. So there's plenty of USL around, but the downfall with USL2 is the fact that that's actually not coming with as part of it. So it's going to be this new. They're actually deeming it. I think the licensing said it's going to be called the Premier League. So the USL Premier League Championship is going to kind of take over as that middle tier, and then USL 1 are all the teams that have officially made their way in. But yeah, to answer your viability question, the thing for me that I do think with this is, I think it's just kind of setting the expectations for like any USL fans that think like this is a for sure certainty and a done deal. I like until the first game is played under a promotion and relegation system. It's one of those things where it's like, I think this is still a 50-50 proposition that it even happens.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well.
I don't get me wrong. And this is, I think I might start even to get like kind of perceived optically as like this MLS backer that like doesn't want USL.
Biz is paid by big MLS.
Big MLS, Apple corporate paying me the big bucks. But no, I as a lover of just like the sport itself, I want this to succeed because I think it is really good for just the overall landscape of the sport in general in America. Totally. I think having a secondary system that is proven to work outside of the American sports model is, I mean, that would be a huge development in American sports because that's what MLS has really shifted to and how it's found viability financially itself is the fact that it has this really strong spine now that's been created with over time, kind of pragmatically thinking, how do we make sure that there's profitability for all of these teams, that they don't fold upon themselves and actually can still sustain themselves so they're self-operating and self-running. Yeah. And I think having the league back it and having all of the teams under like a single entity where they are all under the league's ownership, but like all individually operated by also individual owners where they make their own business decisions of what's best for the league, is a unique thing that is not necessarily something we see in all other, versions of soccer and world football. It's just not how things operate. So having another league come in the States and setting up this promotion relegation style after already having a league that kind of had closed pyramids, well, not even closed pyramids, but just closed league systems in general. And now we're adapting to a closed league pyramid system where you're going to have it where there's no going below this League One. I do think is the correct way to do it. Now, having said that, there's various different questions, and you guys can react to these too, because I'll list off a couple of the things that I personally think, and I've also kind of heard that I've added on to my list of questions that need to be answered. And this is coming from the USL's mouth themselves too. Of they have not, like, there's not a ton of foresight on like the answers to some of these questions. There's still things in these couple of years that they have to address and figure out.
Because it's a loose timeline anyways too. It's just by 2028.
We don't even know what teams are going to be a part of it.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, they haven't announced. Like, that's the other thing. It's like this new division. It's like kind of this mysterious haze over it of like, what, like, where are the markets even? Like, where are we targeting? So I think that's another thing that, like, that's the first domino that needs to fall is what, like, get that full Premier League season established and get all of the teams in the markets set up. And it's like, what did those all look like from a financial viability standpoint too, of like, are those teams going to be like financially fit? What does the investment look like for those teams? Because obviously owners that are coming into the league too are going to be tied where they're just going into the top division and putting in a large sum of money that's tied to that. And then if those teams immediately relegate, it's like, what is that going to do to the bottom line of those teams? I think that's a really big thing that's going to have to be figured out. And how do you like help those teams long term to make sure that they are financially sustainable over time? So I think that's question number one. Geography and that, like, the cost of that too, I think is a really big question for some of these teams. So I've posed the question in past discussions we've had about this, where if you have a team from League One that is maybe one of the smaller teams that maybe is in a market that whatever the benchmark of attendance that I think is probably going to also have to be put into play of, you have to have, a 10,000 seat stadium and ensure that is, part of things. So you have enough fans and you can have enough income to sustain a team itself. Like, if you hit those benchmarks, what is it team, in one of these smaller markets, if it makes its way all the way up to the Premier Division, can they handle a full travel? If it's a small little team up in the Northeast, like a Vermont or something like that, can they handle travel all the way out to like an Orange County or an LA, like an LA team? Because that's not cheap. You're going to have to figure out like the charter flights. You're going to have to figure out all these different things.
Because this transcends regional leagues now.
It does.
It's because it's just going to be the 20 best teams. It's not the 20 best teams from the West Coast the way they kind of do it nowadays. So
another big thing is, even though maybe the first season goes off without a hitch, those problems are going to be just kicked down the can. Like the can is being kicked down the road. If let's say a second division side gets promoted and can't afford those, and then just goes further and further down into becoming not a team. And then the other issue that's also raised is they've been talking about making Patterson a team. So it's like, which teams are they choosing, which teams are they creating, and how are they going to juggle creating a league and creating the identity of a league while also juggling creating identities for each teams. Obviously, that's the job of the teams, but it's
Yeah,
still going to be a huge
absolutely.
challenge of like, that's sort of on the USL as well to propel those new teams that don't have a fan base,
I wonder
while
if
also
we
trying to keep rules.
I wonder if we see the San Diego team that got disbanded to form the MLS
Yeah.
Yeah,
team
that'd be
come
awesome.
back
I'd love
because
that.
they were a very popular USL team. So no, there's did you have any more questions that the USL posed, Biz, or were those the main
I
ones?
mean, kind of piggybacking off of Pix too, just like a couple extra little miniature thoughts on it. But yeah, because I think Pix hit the nail on the head for kind of the overall thought that I was trying to make sure was conveyed. But yeah, how you handle relegation with some of these teams was a big one. But also just how is the whole format of promotion and relegation going to be the most feasible for the league itself to function? Is it going to be you only have one team promoted, one team
Yeah.
relegated? Because I think those are the other questions when you actually have it. I already know that there's been like outwardly on social media reading through some of the comments and people being frustrated that it's not like a fully open pyramid. And I just think like the long-term naivety of like some of these fans that like wanted to emulate, the European sport so bad. There's just no foresight on understanding like what needs to happen financially to make it doable. There needs to be so much of a financial backing to make sure that these teams can even exist, first of all.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to have to be really thoughtful on how you go about handling how many teams do get relegated each year, how many teams are getting promoted, in the various leagues. Is it 1-1 each?
Yeah,
each
I
year?
feel like
How
they
does
need to be
playoffs work?
they need to be careful. Just I feel like ideally you start with a smaller league in terms of how many teams are in it, because if you start out too big and because you're creating all this new league style infrastructure and logistics from scratch, if you try to include so many of these teams that already exist, it's going to be such a problem because you're just giving yourself more chances for these teams to kind of buckle under the pressure of of the spend to get to certain places, of the logistics to do certain things. So I'm very curious. Like it just got voted on this past week as a yes, and a lot of details are missing. The timeline is blurry. There is a chance that it might not even happen. They basically just voted to say, yes, we would allow that to
We're
happen.
going to try. Yep,
Exactly.
Try. Yeah.
There'll definitely be more news in the next few weeks. And once we get a full plan from the USL or whoever's going to provide that, we'll definitely be talking about it. But yeah, that's the good and the bad in our intro. US men's national team shit in the bed a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of bit. And the USL promotion relegation yet to be seen. Maybe it will be bad news. Who knows? I'm hoping it'll be good news. I think it's good for the game. Yeah. But other than that, let's get into MLS weeks 4 and 5 right now. The main topic is what you came for. Ow! All right, guys. So if you guys watched the watch parties, this is when we are recording the pod right after that. So we just witnessed San Diego FC lose to Austin FC 2-1. But a lot of action in weeks 4 through 5 of the MLS. A few interesting storylines that we want to talk about. Some big things coming from Vancouver, Philly staying on top. But where I really want to kick us off with is an interesting quote from Matthew Doyle, who writes one of the weekly columns for the MLS.com. And I thought it was a really interesting analysis in terms of some of the trends of some of the top teams in the league and, how they built the team and whether it's coming from a player or a coach perspective. So I'll quote him exactly. Of the top 10 returning teams in the Supporters' Shield race, only 2 of them have new DPs in their starting 11. Of those same 10 teams, 6 have new coaches. So basically what Matthew Doyle is implying is that the big signings, the star DP style signings, haven't been the thing that's trending teams upward. It's been new coaches, it's been new regimes, it's been new systems being implemented, maybe in sometimes with very similar players in the starting 11 or just a few new additions. Pix. Sure. Have you noticed anything like that in the Eastern Conference with your Red Bulls and some of the teams that they're playing, or from a league-wide perspective, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest examples, and this transcends East versus West, is Philly getting rid of their coach. And obviously in the beginning we were so, that was such a big question mark, but obviously, in hindsight that's paid off.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that just the idea of just like having the DP there for a season beforehand or anything like that, just getting them those minutes and those game time to really learn the system and learn how to play, especially learning how to. I think the MLS is such a different league that a lot of players come in here and don't know how to adapt that well. I think Luis Muriel is one of the best attackers that I've seen, and he didn't adapt very well either. Giroud is another player who, despite he's not, within the same style, he's failing to adapt as well because he's not even able to switch his style to adapt into the LAFC system either. So I think that the new coach provides so much more because they can bring in a breath of fresh air as opposed to the new player that has to, still have time to adapt. And I think that new manager balance, we've seen so many, I think this season especially, Bruce Arena, New England, Philly, St. Louis, so many different coaches. And I think that this is the time where people and MLS teams are trying to really identify a style. When Messi's here, when they have all eyes, this is the time where we really want to make a style. And a lot of teams were actually trying to break that. Like Philly broke, however long Jim Curtin was there for. Really surprised a lot of people. But yeah, I think it's really interesting seeing how, the coach is more so the really big factor.
Yeah.
But also it kind of like really calls into question, when is it time to move on from a coach? And I think that that's something that the MLS still hasn't figured out still. And I feel like because the MLS coaching jobs are such a revolving door, sometimes you see the same names all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like it's very easy for coaches to adapt in the MLS, but I feel like it's a lot harder for players to adapt.
No, I totally get that. And I want to pause on 2 points that you made before I pass it over to Biz. Luis Muriel really settling in better in Orlando City this year. And one thing I've definitely noticed is Facundo Torres, despite being an incredible player for Orlando City, I don't think he necessarily gelled the best with Muriel. Facundo is definitely a player that felt like he wanted to keep the ball on his foot. He wanted to be the chance creator. I feel like Muriel and him oftentimes got in their own way. But new signing that has come in from the Croatian league in Pasalic has been absolutely cooking with Muriel.
Banger yesterday too, like an absolute banger.
No, he has. I was worried about Orlando City, because they're okay. I would say they're a middling team coming into this season, and Pasalic was expected to fill in for that Facundo Torres spot, and he has done it. And honestly, has been more of a better team fit for Orlando City this year, I feel like, especially with what they're expecting out of Muriel. So just wanted to make note of that. And then Philly losing their first game in week 4, getting a red card and falling to who'd they lose to? They lost to Nashville in week 4, who are off to a best ever start through 5 weeks for Nashville under Greg Vanney, a guy that, some may have been disappointed, got passed over for that U.S. men's national team job when we brought
BJ Callahan.
Oh, BJ Callahan. Sorry. I'm too on my Galaxy
he's
shit.
His own team. He's got his own team in his head.
Sorry. I was like, what am I talking about? Yeah, but BJ Callahan, a guy that, when Greg Berhalter got brought back to the U.S. men's national team, I was like, why didn't we just keep Callahan? I felt like I liked what he was cooking over there. But Philly came back, won 1-0 against St. Louis City, who have been very good defensively in week 5. So Philly still on top in the Eastern Conference. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Biz. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about Philly or some new coaches. But what do you think about that whole new coach, analysis in the league for this season?
Yeah, I mean, with the early data points that you have, I mean, it's hard to deny if you're looking through it. I mean, I can even just list off, Bradley Carnell at Philadelphia Union, Jasper Sorensen at Vancouver Whitecaps on a team that has perennially been like a play-in game caliber team that has always maybe like underperformed on what a lot of people think is with their roster. Dean Smith with Charlotte, who technically was a new coach last year, but just got signed to an extension with how he's done with Charlotte thus far. Javier Mascherano counts as a new manager. Callahan's been there for a year and a half with Nashville. Berhalter with Chicago. Those are just the top 6 teams in the Supporters Shield right now. So, I mean, they're all new within the last year and a half. So I do think that there's something to be said about bringing in a new mind, and on top of it too, I think the other thing that I'm really liking that MLS is starting to do is we're getting out of what Pix mentioned too. Like, it still happens with the revolving door, but I think you see a lot of teams like we just watched a team in the watch party with Austin where they hired an MLS repeat coach where it didn't work somewhere in Nico Estevez with FC Dallas, where he had a solid couple year try there, and then Austin, I know a lot of their supporters were really upset with that hire because that's somebody that you've already seen what they've provided in the MLS. And I think like bringing somebody maybe out from outwardly in and bringing a new ideas, new principles, all these different things that maybe the rest of the league doesn't have like a really good handle on, is just a competitive advantage, I think, out of the gate too, with a lot of how MLS operates with the attack style of play. So I think that there is something to be said about, having new, we have it here with Eric Ramsey, who's only been here for a year and a half and has just kind of stamped his personal style on the team, with maybe leaning a little bit more onto the defensive side and maybe playing kind of almost like the antithesis of the style of the league, where it's
Can I ask you a quick question? Do you guys think, in terms of this closed pool of coaches that oftentimes get passed around in the MLS, obviously that's what you get in most other American sports, because that's just, this is where the sport lives. But in a game like soccer, where it's such a world sport, do you think that's more of a indication of the organizations being closed-minded or not having knowledgeable people in-house that have a good basis of information for what's going on in the bigger soccer landscape in terms of coaching? I feel like that might be harder to key in on and see and get people over here, maybe because they don't know what type of coaches would work in the MLS and they're just okay with what's familiar, maybe just, sticking in CONCACAF, maybe going to Liga MX or Canadian coaches. But I don't know. I think it's interesting the way that Minnesota brought in a Man United assistant coach to become their head coach. That's definitely something that's a little bit more out of the box. And then we saw Pix. What team did you mention with the mid-tier Bundesliga team coach?
That's me, Sandro.
Okay.
We got him from Hertha.
Yeah, so
he was all over the Bundesliga. So
it's very interesting. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think there's organizations that just don't have that knowledge, or is that kind of naive to say? And they, because where these decisions are coming from in an organization, we've seen it, with behind the scenes look into other American footballing or American sports. It's like these decisions are oftentimes made by like owner type people who might not have the biggest basis of knowledge to make these decisions on.
I think one of the biggest things is that the MLS still globally isn't still respected to the level that I think that it should. We can all agree that it deserves to be a little bit more respected, but I think that a lot of coaches don't really see it as a viable place to really grow from sometimes, because of the fact that it's so different from everywhere else.
Sure.
Once you're in the MLS, and this is just speaking from, what I think maybe some coaches might be thinking, but, if you can do it in the MLS, can you do it somewhere else? It doesn't really translate the same. Whereas I think if you're an MLSer, and that's what I've been trying to say, is where, if you're a coach that's in the MLS, you know how the MLS works. You never have to worry about it. But for a coach that's in Europe to have to learn, even having to learn a, playoff system, a lot of players weren't even understanding that. So having to come over here and learn what soccer is instead of football is super different for a coach. And I think that some of them might still see it as a step backwards. And that's why you see so many of the players or of the coaches are former players or people who have connections, like the Red Bulls have connection with the German league. So that's how we got, Sandro. So it's like most of the times that you get those outside, it's through connections, especially through as we talked about on the watch party, the guy who had joined either Austin or Dallas through Valencia's academy, because they're focusing on the youth and poaching it from that. So it's just I think a lot of it comes from the reputation from the coaching perspective. I think that we're still behind even more so than the players. But I think that we are making strides, just with Minnesota United, with Red Bulls, and with even people like even Vanny making a name for himself as an American coach and doing stuff like that.
Can I speak to that too really quick, Dill?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you highlighted Minnesota United, because that's the first thing that popped into my mind, based on what Ramsey said and has been quoted about why he chose this job. He was a pretty highly sought after coach and was kind of deemed over there as being kind of like a coach in waiting, not necessarily for Man U, but for other various jobs. He's Welsh and has a Welsh background. He has, I think his wife actually has ties with the top end level of Swansea, if I'm not mistaken. So he had just been rumored too, because I think they just went through a managerial transition in the last month or two, and his name was top of the list, and he played that off, saying I'm here for at least a while. I'm not, but his whole pretty much his whole thesis of coming over here from the get-go, and what he said was he views this as being a perfect opportunity for any like new coaches, and I'm hoping that's how a lot of European coaches start to view this league. Because if you actually think about it, with how he laid it out, I actually think it's pretty smart and makes me feel like he really does have a proactive way of thinking with his own career in mind. With this being a closed system, it kind of gives you a unique opportunity where the stakes from a like developmental standpoint are a little less important from like if you're struggling. So it gives you some time to make mistakes as a coach. Like if
try things,
build up and try some things and make sure that your tactics are right to the league, and has allowed him to be a little bit malleable with his style. And you don't have that luxury necessarily if you're going and trying to, take over a relegation project right away in the championship in England, where it's
you need things to work right away. Yeah,
exactly. And that's a lot of these guys. It's for these new guys that get a chance. It's like that's your first job, and if you screw it up, you're going to be labeled as like this guy can't do it. You know what I mean? Like that's a huge thing for like a person, kind of staking their reputation on like, well, I just took a job because it was like the first big opportunity that I really had, and I like just felt like I needed to jump at the chance. When instead you're coming to a team like Minnesota United that really had like. We haven't won anything. We've kind of had poor results in our past, and have started to build up some equity as we've gone on as a team. And now like our goal is to, start to get to some lengthy heights of like, maybe making a Champions League run at some point, of actually clinching and being in that competition, or making an MLS Cup run. Like those I think are like the aspiring goals of what we want. And that's maybe a little bit more alluring to a coach that has never done it before, where like the worst thing that happens is if you finish outside the playoffs, you just do it again. With the standpoint of some things started to go right towards the tail end and we figured it out. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a little bit easier to lobby your case. And I think you've seen that with a couple different coaches. I think Wilfred Nancy was a really good example, where developmental signing that signed as an assistant for Montreal, Thierry Henry gave him a stamp endorsement when Henry was the coach over there. And he ended up during the COVID, it was during the COVID lockdown that he actually ended up leaving, just because he was homesick and had to be kind of locked in Canada and away from his family. So, but he gave like his stamp of approval to Wilfred Nancy when he was on his staff, saying like, this is the guy, like go and sign this guy. And you're starting to see a little bit more of that, where some people are starting to come over and maybe kind of sought out those positions way more than it has in the past, where you're not seeing like a Pablo Mastrioni hire for Real Salt Lake, where he's done an admirable job there, in my opinion, but like just an old U.S. men's national team player that like has some pedigree with their name recognition alone, and you just hope that they know what they're doing within the league. And I feel like that's changed over time.
I feel like a lot of MLS teams oftentimes and ownership groups play it safe, because with the amount of teams that make the playoffs, if you can just grab a coach that's a little bit better than the one you have now, you're just effectively trying to raise your floor, because if you get into those top few spots, then you can make a playoff run. Whereas if you're looking at a coach maybe from Europe or a different outside league, those are the teams that I think are more trying to raise their ceiling. The floor might stay the same, and there might be a little bit more risk involved, but you could take it to places that your team or the league might not be familiar with, just because you're bringing in fresh blood into the league. And it's nice to see these younger coaches. I think everything that I heard when you talked about Ramsey is like, the opportunity he has to come here is to try things, and it's okay to take some licks. And, there is patience with a team like Minnesota. It's like, you guys haven't been in like a bunch of positions where the expectation is super high anyways. So it's like anything that you get out of him is going to be really good, and he can try a bunch of different things, and just having a fresh style of play is going to be, refreshing for the entire fan base as well. So it's definitely interesting with these coaches. As the season progresses, we'll definitely see these storylines kind of change, ebb and flow. I'm curious to see how well the new coaches, in the new places fare against the coaches who were in their last season. One coach that I definitely want to highlight, who's doing very well, and hey, maybe we can have him be the coach for the World Cup again for the third time. Greg Berhalter getting Chicago Fire a 3-1 win in this past game week. Hugo Kuipers scoring in the first minute for him. But what are we thinking about Chicago throughout this season so far? I am pretty impressed with the style they're playing. Obviously, they beat Vancouver Whitecaps, who have been the best team in the West so far. But obviously they're coming off a pretty busy schedule with, the CONCACAF Champions League that they're playing in. But Pix, what do you think about Berhalter and the boys? Would you be scared if the Red Bulls have to play them very soon?
I think we do actually have to play them soon.
So are you scared?
I am a little bit more scared than I was in the beginning.
Are you?
Tell me!
The last Berhalter game I watched was I was at the Colombia U.S. friendly, the 5-1,
Mhm.
and I saw
Oh
someone
God, I forgot about
with
that.
with a shirt that said,
So bad.
it said, what was it? In Berhalter we trust, or something like that. And then he gets fired like 3 games later.
Oh, that's a
uh,
that's a good fan though. You know,
Yeah,
he'll ride with
standing
it.
by him.
He'll die by Berhalter. Not
Yeah,
many
standing
yeah,
by
would.
him.
Not many would.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But I just think it's interesting to see Chicago starting to actually make a name for themselves again. I think
Hmm.
that
Yeah,
that's what we
3 in a
need.
row.
Chicago is just a
Yep.
team that deserves that. I think Bamba has been really good, and
Yeah, Bomba's sweet.
yeah, it just the other player. What's the other player is like third in the goal scoring right now.
He's second. Kuipers with
Yeah,
5.
Yeah, Kuiper.
Kuipers, and then
Yeah,
Zinkernagel, their other Austrian second, which is an
that's
insane
not a
last
real
name.
name.
But
That's Willy
but
Wonka name right there.
go back and watch. Being that I was at the game, I didn't get to watch a lot of the main slate like I normally do. But I went and watched the highlights this morning, and I mean, he was all over, like fingerprints all over that game. Like I think he has a goal and an assist for the year. Both of them came in that last game. So I mean, like he figured it out in that Vancouver game. And
Hmm.
if you watch the highlights, I was super impressed with what like some of the plays he was making. It was kind of honestly similar with some of the channel passing consistently like sliding into Kuipers behind the highline like we just watched in that Austin game, doing it to San Diego nonstop. But yeah, the goalie scored, the assist that was made, it was very impressive. So that front three is pretty menacing overall for Chicago. I'm
Yeah,
impressed.
I mean they've been playing open and positive all season in their first 5. Lost to Columbus to start the season 4-2. Tied DC United in the second week 2-2, and then a 3-1 win over Dallas, a 2-1 win over Toronto, and a 3-1 win over Vancouver. Yet to score less than 2 goals in each of the 5 games. Yeah, pretty impressive from that front 3. Kuipers was a little bit quiet last season, acclimating. I think it was his first season last year, right?
It was,
For
yep.
Chicago. Yeah. But, obviously awaking now. But I'm going to talk about the team that they beat a little bit too. Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
Dare I say, Biz, you let me know. Is this the biggest win in club history over Monterrey in the Champions League for CONCACAF for Vancouver?
For club history, now forgive me, I'm not super well versed on Vancouver.
Well, I'm putting you on the
Vancouver
spot right
Whitecaps
now.
lore. I would say yes, educated guess off rip from like way back when. I can't think of anything that's ever been bigger. They don't have a MLS Cup to their name, so I would say definitely yes. I would be hard pressed. Maybe a Vancouver supporter can come into the comments in the YouTube video and just let me know I'm way off with some MLS playoff performance that like I'm oversighting. But no, that was, I mean, truly incredible. We're talking about this. It ended up being, I think it's the second highest salary in North America right now. If you're talking about like the full roster itself, in Monterrey's roster, so it's the second most expensive team in North America. And you went and did that, honestly, playing mostly a rotated side without your best player in the team.
Yeah, no Ryan Gauld.
Unbelievable result for them, and then on top of it too has also not only doing that but also maintaining your consistent results for your midweek game as well, where you were able to or the previous Saturday, excuse me, where you were able to pull a result there, and you're still atop the MLS standings as well with also pulling that off. So it's like just, I mean, a killer first month.
Only team to beat a
Vancouver.
Mexican team in this leg of the CONCACAF Champions Cup and have a chance to do it in the next round too. They're playing Pumas. Galaxy have Tigres. LAFC and Inter Miami play each other, and then Cruz Azul and Club America play each other. Biz, in terms of that, do you think Vancouver has a good chance over Pumas?
I mean, yeah, Pumas has not been very convincing in the games that they played. I felt like we're really vulnerable in that the first round matchup against Cavalry, the CPL squad.
Yeah.
And without like a timely red card early in that second leg, I actually thought that Cavalry looked good for that game.
Yeah, they had some great chances to go score more goals in those legs, and yeah, that was disappointing that they weren't able to get it done.
Another big thing is Pumas' new coach is actually a former Atlético Nacional coach.
Wow.
So,
okay.
It always comes back to the Colombians, huh, Pix?
But he's actually really, really an exciting Mexican coach. He won us like the triple.
Okay, flex.
On his first season, so it's just
that's a good hire. That's a good hire then for Pumas.
Because the way that he came out was a little bit weird, where it's just like he was gonna stay, but then he didn't stay, and then we got a new coach, and then he didn't want to stay. It was a weird situation, but he's finally back in
Undecided.
Mexico. And I think Pumas is an exciting team because it's like they're a team that like to focus on youth a lot too. So
Sure.
he's a guy that, especially at Nacional, was working a lot with the youth. So it's going to be exciting, and I'm definitely going to be tuned in for the Vancouver Pumas game then.
All right, this is going to be excellent podcasting planning, bringing it all together. We just watched a Austin FC watch party. We're talking about MLS and Liga MX. MLS versus Liga MX All-Star Game returning to Austin this season. Biz, do you like the All-Star Game?
So as someone that has attended the
Wow.
MLS versus Liga MX All-Star Game, because it was actually just recently in
This guy's paid
Minnesota,
actor right here.
as of 2 years ago, I think. It was fun to attend. I did enjoy. We could have gone to the skills competition. I kind of regret not going to that. But the game itself, I feel like out of any setup with these exhibition style games
All-Star
that they play,
games,
because it's a unique situation. It's unlike any, because they're trying to have it emulate like an American style of doing these all-star games where you're playing a team versus a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's always been the style of play in all of the American sports. It's normally like, whatever conference versus whatever conference has been kind of the timeless tradition of like Eastern versus Western. And that's always served a purpose but the stakes have never been super high in a lot of the American all-star games. I feel like they've
very
decentralized
light exhibition play.
I think the one that's probably been the most competitive has been Major League Baseball has tied it to like home field advantage in the World Series in the past. That's actually changed over the last couple of years too, where that's no longer the case. So like I feel like All-Star Game equity is like at an all-time low of like people caring about it. The one thing I will say though with this MLS Liga MX change, because MLS, for anyone that's not familiar too, some Europeans might remember that for a long time we would have just like really big clubs come in for their like preseason tours and stuff like that, because it usually takes place during the summer off-season months. So you'd have like the Arsenals, the Chelseas. I think we had Celtic one time. So it's like it's been all of these different big squads have come over and then play the MLS best versus whatever team comes into town and usually is playing at least like 45 minutes of their best players in the preseason tour. And that just always, I felt like kind of fell flat. It never felt like the stakes were really relevant. And MLS versus Liga MX All-Star Game is kind of interesting just because there is I feel like we're starting to get to that point where with Leagues Cup, you are starting to get that butting of heads between the two, where it's like who's better with the Champions League.
There's more volume of games being played to build that
correct.
relationship. Yeah.
And on top of it too, you also are always going to inherently have those markets there is always going to be Mexican fans here locally as well, no matter where it's hosted. So you're going to have those fans that might not, maybe have either immigrated here or have always lived here that never thought they'd get an opportunity to go see, their favorite player.
Texas is a perfect spot for it too, for that type of All-Star game. So
it is. So you're gonna have tons of different supporters there for various reasons, both like the Austin season ticket holders that are just MLS fans, but you're also gonna, like you said, Dill, you're gonna have a lot of Mexican supporters there too that are gonna be super thrilled to be able to probably see some players that from their own local teams of maybe where they grew up were getting to see Cruz Azul player or a Monterrey player that they didn't think they'd get to see. So that is cool. And now, now on top of it too, with what Liga MX is recruited, where you have Sergio Ramos in the league, it's like you're starting to have some star power come to that league too with the Club World Cup, injecting some, I think maybe a little bit more eagerness to build some of those teams and actually have some notable players to be a part of that for some of those runs. So yeah, those players could be included into the All-Star game too. So it's like you're going to have those as being a highlight too, where both sides are going to have notable names now, as opposed to maybe one side leaning a little bit more domestic products compared to what the other side has done over these last couple of years. So I personally do like it, but I can also see the criticism. But I don't know, Pix, what do you think about it as somebody that is kind of new to the idea with it too?
I'm a big fan of the MLS All-Star Game, but on the other hand, I'm not a terribly, like, you just raised some good points, but I'm not a terribly big fan of having it be Liga MX. You just brought up a great point about like the butting of heads, and especially one of the things I love the most about the All-Star Game is the selection process, where it's like they kind of gave you like a one sentence breakdown of like why they chose it, and it's like some of it's just like the commissioner chose these players, but a lot of it is like some of it's like coaches vote, right, Biz? Like coaches
you get
vote
that. There is fan
voting,
if I remember correctly. It's been I don't
So
remember that piece,
some of
but
it
I'm
comes
assuming there is.
from the coach that is actually selected for the All-Star game. That's coaching the MLS side. They get some picks, but I just love the idea of just all these different styles making up a roster.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be interesting if Liga MX did that too, to kind of like compare it with it.
Mm.
But I don't like the idea of us doing it every single year against Liga MX. I think that there is the issue of having those, the preseason games against those. We had Arsenal, I think, a year or two ago, and it isn't as competitive. But I would like to see them try something a little bit different than just Liga MX, since we already have the Leagues Cup and stuff like that. But I do think that what you're saying, where like the butting of heads, and that makes it put a little bit more on the line, is more interesting.
Mm.
And especially with having just more fans attending is more important than
Yeah.
the quality. So
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of things that to be said about it, but overall, I love the All-Star game personally. I think it's just like, another, like, it doesn't have to be serious or anything like that. I don't think it's like, the same where it's like adding another game onto the calendar.
Mm.
But I think it's fun, especially where it's, you're really showcasing the MLS and showcasing players playing together. It's kind of like playing like a Football Manager or Ultimate
Yeah.
Team, where you're just combining, the best players of the league and
It's
seeing how they can flesh out.
that's always been I mean, for anybody that's not familiar with the concept of like the All-Star game too, that's always been the reasoning for it. It's been that's exactly it. It's in any of these sports, like the NBA All-Star game, the MLB All-Star game. It's getting all of the best players in the world, theoretically, based on whatever league you're watching. But a lot of the American leagues are presumed to be the top end of their sport and kind of the pinnacle of the sport. So that's always been theoretically the reason why we do this. It's getting all of the best talents in the world on the same field, court, pitch, whatever it is, for a certain amount of time to actually watch and see what that would look like. And I think like that had always been the allure, and like that would be entertaining enough. But I think they've been going for a while now, and a lot of times too, with various sports, players are starting to see that like there's no incentive with how much entertainment and how many games we're trying to jam into some of these seasons. Risking injury for like an exhibition just doesn't seem
Exactly.
viable to a lot of these players, and I feel like that's why the product in a lot of these is suffering across all sports right now. So I think it's unfortunate, because I do think that like the concept of it is really cool and fun, and it adds to the game. But we've also kind of hit a tough spot with some of the stuff where how competitive should it be, and how much should the players try without like the compensation angle. And you could talk about that as a whole nother podcast, honestly, with how NBA has been trying to handle it too, with like trying to hand out like some cash prizes and stuff like that too, where it's like you got to figure out a way to make it where these players do at least partially care, and try, where they're not just mailing it in and rocking the Mario Balotelli, spinning back heel like one season in front of the goalie, and getting subbed off immediately after. It's like you don't want that level of effort. You want to see players, playing at the highest possible level and stuff like that if you can.
All right. Well, interesting thoughts about the next MLS All-Star game. I'm excited. I agree. I just want to see the guys try. I want there to be bad blood between the All-Stars versus Liga MX, and hopefully, with the CONCACAF Champions Cup matchups and how that eventually ends. It's only Mexican and American, U.S. teams left, so good games can be come out of that. But we're going to be talking about a team that will not be playing at the highest level very soon here. La Liga is getting another Club World Cup spot over León from Mexico because of dual ownership. So La Liga, with a couple wins, could propel themselves over the rest of Costa Rica. And things about León, this is where James Rodriguez went to go play, and he is a renowned mercenary right now in his career. So Pix, because you're a James guy, big James guy, that's your 10. How do you feel about this, and can you kind of talk through what just happened with this Club World Cup?
So one of the issues is that both Pachuca and León have the same ownership group, or the same owners, and through that, the team that I'm pretty sure came in second place in the competition, Alajuelense, which is La Liga, which is a team out of Costa Rica, they're trying to basically push for that spot, because there isn't allowed to be two of the same ownership groups that represent teams. So as a result of that, right now it looks like Alajuelense are going to get the spot. But
hadn't heard that's who was going to be it. That's crazy.
Yeah.
If that's the case.
I'm pretty sure. At least they're the ones presenting the argument, but I'm pretty sure they're the ones that are.
They're the
pushing
ones
for
that
the
narked them
spot.
out for their own spot.
Yeah. But it's going to be huge because it's going to be so much money per win for this team, and it could really make a statement to make themselves not only super dominant in Costa Rica, but dominant in all of Central American soccer overall, over the Honduran teams, over the Guatemalan teams, and stuff like that. But the other big news as a result of that is that James was part of his contract. I'm pretty sure had something about a clause about playing in the Club World Cup. So as a result of that, he could leave in the summer, and then join Pachuca to actually get that Club World Cup time. So I think
one team. Can I interject just
Yeah,
really
yeah.
quick? 2 picks. The one team I was going to say too, just because my initial thoughts, with no research, but I would have thought too that Columbus might have some say, because that was the team that ended up finishing up runner-up in the Champions League itself against Lyon specifically that year. So like that's another team that you could kind of like point out and say, like, I mean, they honestly, that's the team that I would probably point to and say, like, if I was a supporter of that group, I would be like, just pounding the table saying, like, that's our spot.
Yeah.
Like, we ended up we lost, but it's like, if they're not eligible, then it belongs
because
to us.
there was a whole controversy about Miami getting the spot over Columbus.
Correct, originally.
So
right? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it is La Liga, who I know that they're the ones who are presenting the case. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting for them if they are able to get that spot. They're a team that has actually been competitive. They've won the CONCACAF Champions League twice in their history, as recently as I think 2006. So I think that it's going to be really interesting because they've kind of faltered a little bit throughout years. I think Saprissa have been able to get a little bit more out of the Costa Rican League, and then a few of the other teams, including Herediano and Cartaginesa, have been able to get league titles over a team that had been very superior in the 2000s in the Costa Rican League. So I think that if they do get into the Club World Cup, it's going to be a lot of money coming their way. And I think it's just going to be better overall for the CONCACAF if there's more money for these Central American teams.
Biz, any thoughts about this shakeup in the Club World Cup before we bring up any last topics on the MLS?
Probably not too much outside of just like bringing up that Columbus thing to light. I mean, this is one of those things where with some of the conglomerates that are starting to exist and be present, that is something that the Club World Cup's probably going to have to, figure out going forward on making sure that it's almost like that the whole thought process of like instilling a law kind of and post dating it after the fact that something's already happened, where you kind of feel like without that being something, you kind of feel like they're kind of slapping them on the wrist after not knowing that they did anything wrong too, where it's, you know what I mean? Where it's one of those things where I don't like when a law is implemented. Well, we'll give you a real life example that I actually just heard, where there was something like with the lottery in real life down in Texas, where there was a lady that ended up doing something like incorrectly by the book with like a digital technology on the lottery, but it wasn't put into law yet. And Texas is now trying to like write the law and instill it in this, and trying to like reclaim, I think it was like 80 something million. And they're trying to like reclaim this money from this lady when the law wasn't technically in place, because they're already like ongoing legislation based on like something else that had happened in the past. It's kind of in a similar fashion to that, where you have something that's being laid out that it's almost like you kind of work the system and you manage to figure it out, and then they're calling you on your BS after the fact. And it's like, well, that's kind of on you guys as a governing body to like kind of think about that and write that out on when you're laying it out as an overview. I'm definitely in the camp where I do think like if it's already done, what's done is done. Like put it in writing, set it in stone for the next go around, and just don't let it happen again. But it's like, if these, because you don't want to, open Pandora's box where you have teams like colluding with each other to try to like get into, because I see where that could cause a problem down the line. But I mean, for right now, what this is, I mean, that ultimately seems pretty harmless.
Yeah.
I mean, with like the full on stakes of it's two separate teams that have just happened to win, a continental competition. So I don't know. It does kind of rub me the wrong way when it comes to that, but ultimately Columbus is the spot that I would say.
No, you make a really good point in regards to that. And I guess we'll see what comes out of it. I'm curious to see what team replaces Lyon, possibly. But before we head into our grab bag topic, I would just like to highlight a few other interesting results from MLS Week 5 here. We spoke a good amount about Week 4, but just some of the results and kind of the big storylines coming out of it. Charlotte FC continue a good run of form with a big 4-1 against San Jose, who started off their season pretty well against some struggling teams. New York Red Bulls, despite some missing players, get 2 goals out of Forsberg against Toronto FC. Nashville SC, like we mentioned at the start of the pod, best ever start under BJ Callahan, not Greg Vanney, I never said that, with a 3-0 win over CF Montreal. And I just definitely want to give a shout out to, at the start of this game week, FC Cincinnati 2-2 tie against Atlanta United, a really great game, and Evander is an absolute beast. Portland are really, really missing him, but still beat the Colorado Rapids this week 3-0. So quickly, before we move into the grab bag picks, any of those, obviously you're going to say Red Bulls, but any of those, games stick out to you?
I'm not going to say Red Bulls, actually. I was going to say Atlanta.
Okay.
Since he was one of the big games, because the 2 key players scored in Latila and Evander. And I think Evander showed up. He scored 2 goals within 5 minutes of each other, and he just fires on all cylinders. I thought, it's been a little bit surprising how Atlanta have been struggling a little bit. I think that obviously they were super lucky to get that point from the own goal. So I don't know. I think Atlanta need to do a lot more. I think that they've had a tough schedule, as I've said a little bit earlier, but I think that they just need to do a little bit more. I was expecting a lot out of Miranchuk and Latte, just because of, the amount of money that they've spent and obviously their profile. But I think that obviously it's only 5 games in, so it's still and very tough schedule to start off with. They faced, the gigantic Red Bulls. They just faced Cincinnati.
That's crazy. I feel like before I pass it over to Biz, I feel like Miranchuk really needs to find what his role is on the team when he's not on the ball. I think he kind of just he just doesn't have like a good role on the team when he's not on the ball dictating the play. Like he needs to find his off the ball spot. But Biz,
playing off of that real quick is just like the amount of attacking pieces that he had at Atlanta would be like, if he's on the ball, everyone is pushing up and everyone is an option. And he can't really do that so much at Atlanta, besides having maybe Latte, who's maybe even getting double teamed because they already know his profile. So
I agree.
It is tough.
Biz, any of those games, one you want to highlight before we move into the grab bag?
No, nothing specifically sticks out to me that I can really say that we haven't really touched on. I feel like we've hit the points.
All right, well, that is a great transition. Let's get into the grab bag. It's the grab bag.
Let me reach into that bag.
All right, we've covered the MLS weeks 4 through 5, but we just have a few smaller things that we want to cover before we get into our bi-weekly predictions that go alongside our watch parties. Pix has a trend of the week, which I think he's pulled from the bag before. And what is that trend this week, Pix?
This trend of the week is late goals. I think late goals is the winner of the week. I think we saw so many of them. A few hurt more than others. A few hurt me more than others.
I liked them.
Hurt Biz more than others, but we'll get through all of them. So this is mostly this past week.
Okay.
As opposed to the past
week
2
4.
weeks.
Yeah.
So one of the big ones, one that I think Dill you'd be most excited about was LA Galaxy getting what was it, 92nd minute equalizer? Boy got assist.
I was gonna say you should be excited too. I think it's
excited,
we're collabing on an excitement.
We're just wombo combo.
Yeah, wombo combo, the loon over here.
But yeah, it just
wombo combo reference. I love
it. Biz, you were at the game, so you could speak a little bit more about the confusion about
talk about your sadness. I want to hear it.
And then you could talk Dill a little bit more about
it was awesome.
Did you guys even deserve to get that point?
Yeah, of course.
So for us specifically, we had a big conversation, me and my brother did on the way out, that we're getting a little concerned on what the XG numbers that I've referenced to are, it's one of those things that does illustrate that we've had some chances and we've missed some big chances and haven't been concise with opportunities at certain points of the game. But I do want to also shed some light on the fact that over these last couple games, this Galaxy game specifically, I think the thing, and I think putting a magnifying glass on this one, we were missing 5 starters with international duty too. So
Definitely.
it's a little bit hard to like magnify this specific game versus like the KC game, which I'd probably put a little bit more on with it being a full first 11. But I mean, if you look at the actual goals that we scored in open play, the first one was I audibly laughed and like could not stop laughing on that first goal with McCarthy. I
don't
know
laugh
what
at my
he was
goalkeeper,
doing.
man. That was so bad.
I mean, I legitimately, like, we're sitting around. We have a couple of season ticket holders that have been there with us, and we all turned to each other, and we just could not believe what we just watched. Like, it was such a spastic, like, overreaction for like a pretty simple, like, ball over the top that like he should have been able to like even just like stand pat and probably grab. Like, I don't I don't know if he got screened or what it was, but it seemed like he was so surprised by what it was, and he ended up just parrying it wide, and Yeboah was just there and like almost, I mean, easiest goal he's going to score all year. So that wasn't something that we like created over like good buildup or anything like that. It was just kind of like one of those like half chances that just like turned into a full chance off of like just kind of ineptitude by McCarthy on that specific play.
Totally.
And then our second goal was, I mean, kind of what was referenced on our watch party earlier, where it was kind of a goofy handball in the box that like wasn't off of anything that I felt like the shot initially wasn't going into the net. So it was one of those where it's like, it's always hard to see when you have a player with his arm extended, where it's like, you do have to call it, but it's not something again, where like we were, you know, really putting the pressure on and created this awesome, like goal scoring opportunity that like was built up over time. It was just like kind of another half chance that just resulted in, you know, an opportunity, and Yeboah, you know, when he's in front of net, does not miss at this point. But that's the thing that I think is concerning me the most out of this, is the fact that like our creative abilities were just over these last, this game specifically really seemed a little stagnant, and that worries me. And I think when you play the way that we do in this attacking league, when you're kind of prioritizing defense, it does worry me a little bit, because you're going to have games like this where you're kind of resting your laurels on making sure that you have like a staunch back five that is not going to give up opportunities. And sure, you didn't give up a full goal in XG, but it's like the opportunities were still there. You had 2 chances that LA Galaxy, off of like kind of a scrum or a random thing. Penalties are going to happen when you make a stupid decision in the box off of like a little half chance. It's like, those are the types of things that create goals, where it's like, if a team is able to, you know, fend off some of your counter attacking opportunities and you're not putting the ball away, all of a sudden you got a 2-2 game with a late equalizer by a defender in the box, and you're just, you know, walking home, you know, with your head down saying like, what the heck just happened? So it does frustrate me on that. And like I said, we were in a spot where I really wanted us to try to pull points against some of the lower tier opposition right now in Western Conference, and it seemed like an opportunity. But Dill, I don't know, on the Galaxy side of things, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, we'll take a point. We'll take a point every day of the week like that. I mean, we're biding our time as our better players come back. And definitely, I know I was saying, why isn't Julian Odd playing in the first 2 weeks? And now I see why he doesn't play so often. Dude, this guy passes so loosely. I forgot how loose he is with the ball. He does
booed the whole game too, dude, because of an early flop, like the whole game.
I don't know, but I was happy. Garces was so excited to score that goal. I love that, seeing that for the Galaxy. That was awesome. Get Jalen Neal out of here. Garces, he's never emoted like that. But what other like goals you got, Pix?
Yeah, one that hurt me after hurting Biz.
Oh, it's sad.
Vinny Jr., 99th minute winner. It was looking like we were going to get at least a point against Brazil on the road. And we've really not really scored many goals against Brazil. So that one really hurt, especially because it was a deflection.
Sure.
But yeah, and then obviously one that hurt us all in the Panama 94th minute winner.
Thought that knife was out of us. And the U.S. just lost to Canada, so we are the 4th best team in CONCACAF right now.
So down bad.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But one of the things that I want to highlight about that goal specifically is the celebration.
Oh,
and just,
yeah.
like, the amount of joy. And, you know, I don't understand why, because I also fit into this block, but South Americans and Latin Americans fucking love Henry. I don't understand why. I think
everybody loves Henry.
Yeah. Pretty awesome.
Henry's just my guy.
I for one cannot wait for just some of the coldest YouTube shorts and TikTok matchups from that celebration. Like just some Cecilia Waterman quotes leading up to the game, post game, and then leading into that goal, nailing that goal in the Henri,
Yeah,
Henri Selly. They're gonna go. It'll hit pretty hard here over this next week.
And then the last one I wanted to cover, which we spoke a little bit about, was an 88th minute own goal, which got basically Atlanta some points on the road. So just a lot of unfortunate goals, I think. I mean, fortunate for some, unfortunate for others. But, just a crazy amount of last minute goals.
Yeah, I would say the Panama one is just, I still see that in my mind, just rolling past Turner so slow.
We had the KC one. We had the KC one in the 83rd or 84th, and that whole just
that 3-3 flow. My god!
I think the biggest thing too with that. So the game before the Galaxy, we've blown two leads now with these draws, and I think that's the thing that is the most annoying out of it. And the KC game was a 3-0 lead, and we ended up subbing out a couple players. I think honestly to kind of do a solid to a degree with some of the national teams that are about to go on, and also just kind of squad rotation. You see we were all over Kansas City. It was 3-0. It looked like the game was well in hand. We even retreated back into this 5-4-1 that we kind of used to really try to milk kind of tail end of games. And we brought on a couple pieces and it just did not mesh well. And then Casey brought on Daniel Saloy, and it was just, my gosh, it was just curtains, just mistake after mistake after mistake. And when that Jovic goal went in to put it 3-3, I was watching over at my parents with my brother, and we were both just just using every adjective under the sun of saying pathetic, ridiculous, how in the hell did that just happen? So it's been a tough 2-week stretch.
Dang, yeah. for Minnesota need to win. I don't like Biz this sad. This is making me sad. All right, let's bring up some better news. For my grab bag, it's going to be a slight bag, just my fingers in the bag. MLS abroad again. I think this is one I'm going to be going to very often because it's one of my favorite things to talk about in terms of football, soccer, whatever you want to call it. We call it soccer, I guess. Cucho scores his first ever goal for Real Betis in a win over Leganes in a 3-2 win. And I just want to double check because that was in game week 4. Yeah, he hasn't scored after that. But yeah, awesome to see Cucho score. We had mentioned before he had 4 starts before that, and they had won all 4 of those games while he was started. He had been doing well in the hold-up play, in the dribbling. His passing was okay, but it's nice to see him get on the board, and hopefully that continues because he is their 9. They did bring him in to be the 9 for the team, so that makes me very, very happy. I think a player that I definitely want to highlight very soon here, too, is a guy that I was just watching in the Canada-US game a little bit, is Moise Bombito, a player that's started 19 of 21 games for Nice in the French league and is a very highly rated passer, long ball passer from the center back spot, really good in his tackling metrics as well. But we'll do a deeper dive in a couple weeks here. But finally, the last grab bag, something special to me and Biz and Pix to a lesser extent, is some Canadian Premier League opening up on April 5th. So Biz, the big Cavalry FC fan.
Your former champions, put some respect on their name. Let's
exactly,
go.
Exactly. What do we got?
Much better than I could ever do, self-admittedly. But so yes, the Canadian Premier League. We really tout this show as being a North American podcast in general, and that's important to me to not just hyper focus on just MLS specifically. So
exactly.
Having said that, though, Liga MX is the only one that's kind of in the midst of its season outside of MLS, and then I just think TV viewership wise, it's so hard for us to really watch anything outside of MLS and Liga MX, and then the Canadian Premier League is kind of the other one that have TV deals here. You'd be going to some shady sites trying to find anything outside of that, I think. So those are why we kind of focus on those 3.
You don't go to X Soccer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Elon's my boy for finding any Guatemalan league ball that I'm looking for. But the CPL, yes, is coming up quickly. It's actually by the next time we're going to be recording, it will have already debuted their first matches of the season. So April 5th will be the debut of the season. I'm kind of giving you guys just a quick overview of what took place the previous season. So we had 5 teams make the North Star Cup playoffs. Forge FC won the Supporter Shield, and that's how they made it into the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Cavalry FC ended up winning their first ever North Star Cup after finishing second in the league. They hard pressed for the Supporter Shield too. I think they won their final 5 games, coming up 2 points short on the Supporter Shield. And then Atletico Ottawa, York, and Pacific were your other playoff teams, with Wanderers of Halifax, Vancouver, and Valor missing out. The other thing that I also wanted to highlight too, so very exciting stuff that will be starting up, like I said, April 5th. We also are going to have a new team is rumored to be joining in the next, not this upcoming season, but the next season.
Oh, wow.
In Quebec City. So
That's
Quebec
cool.
City is rumored to be getting a team. I don't know if that's officially official, but I have seen on the CPL subreddit that has been.
You're just starting rumors. I like that.
Officially starting
Again.
rumors.
I like that.
Again. I'm so filled with drama. It's my place on the pod. But no, very excited. It would be cool because I know that they have always promoted that they want to add more teams to the Canadian Premiership. And also ultimately there's been talks of they want to get to a point of having promotion and relegation. That's always been something that I've heard in the articles that I've read, that their chairman and commissioner of the league really wants to work towards and have that be a focal point in Canada to work towards. So really cool things happening north of the border for us when it comes down to that league that I'm going to try to pay more attention to it too. Yeah. I know that it is Fox actually has the rights, I believe, as of last year. I don't know if that's changed, but FS2 had league games pretty consistently, so you can watch
I always see them on my Hulu Live, like just popping up randomly. Yeah,
which is really cool. So we have the ability, and that's, half the battle for me is just so long as I know I can watch it, I'll be there to be able to do it. And with what they just, what Cavalry and what Forge just looked like in the CONCACAF Champions Cup too. I was so impressed with what Cavalry looked like.
They really had a chance to win that matchup.
They did. So it's cool to see that the CPL is starting to prop itself up, in comparison to some of these other North American leagues. So just something to keep an eye out if you guys have interest in that. Like I said, Fox here in the States has the rights to it, to my knowledge. And then, I can't help you if you're outside of the States. You're gonna have to do your own research.
Damn,
but
brutal.
But something to pay attention to here as we approach just more ball to be able to watch for anybody, any of those North American sickos out there that want to keep going down that track.
Yeah, we're expanding the MLS sicko into the CONCACAF sicko.
Just full CONCACAF sicko.
Yeah, absolutely. In a few years, I'll be all in on Jamaican Premier League. All right, so let's finish it off with what we do at the end of every episode: the predictions for the Week 7 games that'll coincide with the next watch party, which will be on. What day is that? April 6th, I assume. Is that correct? Picks from that game?
Yes, Sunday, April 6th.
Yep. Sunday, April 6th. So the 3 games we will be covering, the one we will be watching, will be Inter Miami versus Toronto FC. And the other 2 games we will be predicting is Charlotte versus Nashville and Real Salt Lake versus LA Galaxy. So Biz, do you want to quickly remind everyone, if they're new here, how these predictions work?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys would like to get involved, I would encourage you guys to go check the description under this YouTube video if you're watching on YouTube. Otherwise, on Spotify, you can actually find us through various socials that do we have anything linked on Spotify now that I'm saying it out loud?
Yes, we do. I put some stuff on there. Yeah.
You should be able to find us through there. But also, look for us. It's same name across all platforms. So something about soccer, Twitch, YouTube, Spotify. Really, you can find us anywhere. And our Discord link should be there. So getting into the Something About Soccer Discord will allow you to be to unlock opportunity to win prizes through the community picks. So you'll be able to be part of the vote week to week. And so for week 5, you guys will be able to participate in these picks going forward. And then we keep track over time what the community record looks like, as well as the host records itself. So for the host records currently, nothing's really changed because we've kind of all just like the last 2 weeks kind of like in varying ways
coasted,
matched each other. Yeah, coasted. So it's pretty much just kind of stayed. Dill opened a league over the first couple of weeks, and then it's just kind of just treaded water to the same exact stuff. So 7-5 record for Dill. 3-9 for myself and 4-8 for picks. So
guys.
I don't think that there's been any ground gained or lost over the last 2 weeks. I think it's pretty much just stayed status quo. So we'll see if we can lean into that. I was hoping my draw was real close to adding one more. One more. Oh, yeah. I needed one thing to break my way.
Picks. Let's just note the guy who picks draws the most is in last place. I'll just say that right now.
I'm just, we're swinging for the fences. We're trying out here. But then the other thing that I did also want to mention, because we actually do have a long-term pick, so we've started to implement some grading on some long-term predictions just to add a little bit of spice of variety to the show long-term to see just our ball knowledge going forward. So some of the things picked last week, we did actually have one that has officially been done. So picks had Forsberg goal or assist in the next game, and we were going to come back to that. Forsberg scored twice.
In game 5. Count, though.
I think he.
But no, it was game 4. So actually,
listen. I'm an honest man. Okay. I could have just said, yeah, you're right. I got.
I would have lied. I would have just said, yeah.
You should have leaned into that, man. So we'll just call that an F. Pix has no ball knowledge, and
I had to do it for my nephews.
No, I completely forgot about that we had the 2 games in between. So maybe that I think we'll add to that too, and make sure with being that we're bi-weekly, we'll add to making sure that we're identifying which game that you want to do. Because we'll for any of the immediate game picks. But yeah, a couple other things, like we're doing some long-term predictions. We'll skip them this week, but Pixel had one about a specific player like Kevin Muir. We had
that one's actually bad because there's rumors that he might Mexico's in after him. So. And he wasn't called up for this. So I'm 2 back-to-back Fs. It's just not a good one.
That's sad. That's sad.
But
we also had some team picks as well. So like kind of long-term, how they're going to finish in MLS, things like that. And then some personal player stat picks too. So we'll come back to those when the time is right. We'll add to them kind of progressively over, from month to month. It's not going to be every single show. But just whenever anybody wants to add something like that, we will also add that too. And then I'm also probably going to open that up to the community as well eventually, where you guys can throw that in, and we'll keep track of anybody that wants to be a part of that. And read some community picks whenever anybody has a hill they want to stand on and plant a flag. Yeah. So by all means, but who wants to lead us off on the picks here to start? Because we have them listed out. So it'd be Inter Miami, Toronto, Charlotte, Nashville, and Salt Lake and the Galaxy.
I'll go. I think you should start.
Oh, who, Biz?
Yeah,
I want to see which one he does draw for.
All right, Biz. Let us hear it.
All right, so I am going to go Inter Miami over Toronto.
What?
I am going to go. So Charlotte, I'm going to come back to Charlotte.
That's the toughest one.
I'm going to do Galaxy over Salt Lake. I think Galaxy do get 3 points.
Why would you say that so surprisingly?
They are sitting on 2 points. Let's be real. Yeah. And then Charlotte versus Nashville. Ooh, that's 10 points for games. 10 points for both teams with Nashville on the road. That is tricky. I'm going to go Charlotte win in that one. I think Charlotte does win.
Phil, you want to go next?
Oh, sure.
I took the thunder from you earlier. So
Inter Miami win. Galaxy win. My heart said Nashville win. It just, I was tough. I was mixed on that one. I almost wanted to go draw, but I think if I picked a draw, I will inherit Biz's poor record. So I don't want that. So picks, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'll start off with Inter Miami winning. I think we can all agree with that one. Wow. And then I'll go Charlotte as well. And then for the last one, I'll go with RSL for the win.
All right, let's end the pod there. That's a terrible choice. Okay, interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, it does make sense to kind of pick different things if you want to take swings over some people. I know when I have such a big, commanding, huge lead over both of you, I understand that. But no, good predictions. We all go Miami. 2 of us go Charlotte, 1 go Nashville, and then 2 go Galaxy, 1 go RSL. So I'm very interested to see how that ends up shaking out. Inter Miami versus Toronto will probably be a little bit of a bloodbath in, the Sunshine State. Will probably, I don't know. We said all those nice things about Canada and CPL, and now Toronto's going to get absolutely worked on. But other than that, guys, do we have any final things to tell the people before we wrap up episode 5?
No, just I appreciate everybody listening. It's been fun. Episode 5 already. It's been
that is weird.
Quick.
That is weird, especially bi-weekly too.
Yeah.
All right, Picks?
Yeah, another big thing is that both of those games are on Saturday. So Sunday, tune in for the watch party. We could talk a little bit
Yes.
about how, dog shit my picks were, how dog shit any of our picks are. So we'll see.
All right, guys, make sure to follow us on Twitch at Something About Soccer. Subscribe to the YouTube, same thing, Something About Soccer. We really do appreciate all the support. We look forward to continuing these episodes throughout the season. And yeah, still finding our groove, still trying to find the appropriate length of these episodes, the watch parties, everything. But I think we're getting used to it. I hope you guys enjoy, and I hope we can convert some of you into some more soccer sickos. So see you guys in the next one. We'll see you. This episode will be out on Friday. The next episode for a podcast will be 2 weeks from this point, and then the next time to see us, after this would be a watch party on April 6th. So see you guys in that watch party, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.